I'm not gonna get people no more. Like my mama was saying that she's rich dog. I'm not gonna argue with niggas. I'm 45 with the freak niggas. Fuck out of here.
Not too much on free.
Look, I ain't no friend. I ain't no friend.
Yeah, I get what you guys are saying about, the younger crew, but I guess my question is, being an older man myself, are we still in the, times when we were young? We're in the times now, and sometimes we're stuck in our own minds of the older times, thinking about wars, thinking about things that happened, but things have changed, times have changed.
I'm gonna be honest with you. So let me say something. When you said you're an older man, right? And when we were growing up, I grew up in a situation where if you a young man, you an older man, you acting like you fucking don't want to take the knowledge, and you just want to be an asshole, and you left alone. Or if you want to step to a grown ass man, you're gonna get your ass beat by a grown ass man. This shit that's there, it's all the kids are fucking pussies. That's the way they act like. Oh, if someone's fucking 17 years old, you're a fucking man by then. We in an era right now, man, where when I was coming up, I mean, they made Conan fashionable, man. When I was growing up, we had Public Enemy, we had KRS-One, we had X-Clan. We had people who embraced being black and looked at being black like it was a cool thing, and we wanted to learn. We even had songs by KRS, You Must Learn. We were enlightened. Now these little niggas are growing up on Percocet, lean, and thinking that coonery is the thing to do and support Trump, and don't even know what to stand on. They don't study shit. They don't learn shit. They just are lost. Like that dude who was on this panel right now trying to show grace. There are a lot of intelligent young people out there. There are some young people doing the right thing, but when you hear people like that man just now was on the stage saying, it makes me wonder how many other motherfuckers are thinking like this. It's sadly, it's scary. There are a lot of people thinking like him with this coolness, defeatist behavior where they support the rich, racist white man who has no love for him, and they can't even explain why. They spin in circles and shit. They will trade their own heritage in just to try to fit in with the Jersey Shore motherfucker. It's weird. It's the weirdest shit I've ever seen in my life. There is no knowledge whatsoever of even trying to have self-preservation for these motherfuckers. They don't want to sit here and coon our goddamn thing. I don't know if they get platforms that are paid to coon, if they just trolls that are put in by the clubhouse gallery. Who the fuck knows? I'm scared of where this shit's going. It's cooning shit and it's sitting here and
yeah, but I think we gotta work on our patience with these young people. Let's stop now. Honestly, I do think we do need to work on our patience with these young people. So I do agree with Ryan. Now, so
bring him back up, Patty, so he can make himself.
Ryan, are you white or black, Ryan? I gotta ask.
Don't do that, man.
It's all good. It's all good. Little Yachty. Little Yachty said that nonsense about. I want to know if Ryan is white or black.
No, I don't care if he's white or black. That's not the conversation.
I care because white man.
He's on mute and let black people speak real quick.
Yeah, I'm just going to slightly build on it because, like, I mean, even if you weren't actively,
I'm a lot of.
I can't lie. What is he?
He's mixed. It doesn't matter. Just go on mute.
Yeah, he got the white man view.
Don't do that because most of the moderators that run this room, matter of fact, people that run this room are fucking biracial. So
I don't have a problem with that. I'm talking about him. He got a white man.
Okay, so what?
Yeah, so it ain't the same. That's what. So what I was quickly saying is, just to add to that point, I don't even think people should people aren't required to actively be for the cause. There are a lot of people who, aren't for the cause. It just becomes concerning to me, particularly with this younger generation, where they're actively like against things. Like you just be quiet. So for example,
just want to say, and even when y'all talk about when we were young, no, we did do this. We had the chance to vote. If you're 40 or, late 30s, you voted, for Obama probably your first or second time. We could, chose to go a different way. We did not. These new young people are different. If you just listen to what he was saying, he couldn't be told anything. And then when you look in the chat, comprehension is not in the room. Now you have 10 plus adults, varying degrees of success and things, and that's your assertion, is that nobody can comprehend you. These young people are different. They are way, way more indignant and way more entitled than we ever were. So, to just think you know more than everybody on any stage, and to speak with such fervency and such audacity is just crazy. And you see it every fucking day. So I think we showed a lot of patience with him, but he's the one who wouldn't be quiet, and he's the one who really wouldn't take it. And I don't think nobody yelled at him or anything, but that's a typical, YN. But like they said, if you take this back pre-internet, they can't survive. They can't. They talking about they want to go back to the 19.
Can I jump in? Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, I understand the level of cynicism, right? The accelerationist argument is basically saying, government doesn't work, it hasn't worked, it can't work, so just blow the whole thing up. But I think the one of the big things they're missing is the scale of human suffering seems to really be glossed over in that scenario, like in this imagination where, okay, America just ends, and then tomorrow we have something better or whatever. Like, that's not really how it's going to work. And I found it really troubling, the metaphor he used, right, where the American people are DV victims who have been abused by their government, and Trump is an even bigger abuser who's going to hurt them even more and get them to realize, through the means of government, and get them to realize, oh, this is abusive and I need to get out of it. I don't really think that metaphor stands. So I feel like if your primary motivation is not to reduce human suffering, then I just don't know what we're doing here. And I also think something that's missing is an understanding of how a dictatorship works. So this idea that somehow under Trump or those closely aligned with him, that things are going to get so bad that eventually the people just rise up and it all is over. That's not really how dictatorship works. Once they're in power, they can stay in power for many, many decades. And it doesn't matter how bad things are or how bad you want to get out of it. They're in control and they have the guns. And that's how it works.
It took a world war to get Hitler out of power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think they're maybe they're not really students of history and understanding the scale of the things that they're actually talking about. The last thing I'll say is just about the connection between evangelicalism and white supremacy. I'm sure so many of you know the quote by Martin Luther King about the Sunday morning church hour being the most segregated hour in America. And if you look at what a lot of these evangelical and Catholic churches are teaching, it is very closely aligned with white supremacy and with patriarchy. Under the church system, the modern day typical white church, it's basically all white people. All the white men are in charge. Women play a very secondary, non-decision making role. Very few people of color are empowered in any kind of leadership except in their own personal homes.
So when people talk about all this, oh, there's going to be like a revival in America, and there's going to be this, and there's going to be that, like when they talk about following God and Jesus, like they are imagining a very patriarchal white supremacist message. So I'll just land there.
And I'm glad you said that because a lot of what's happened to like black people over the last few years, particularly guys like Umar Johnson, Tariq Nasheed, it was appeal back to the 60s or the stronger time period when we had less rights but more unity, and they kind of placed this image out of the concept of Puritan when people are much more separate and the black folks live across the tracks. And I don't think a lot of these younger people understand what they're exactly asking for, what they exactly believe in. They don't understand the idea of like the 1% black didn't have much autonomy outside their own house. And even then, somebody come barging out to take what they wanted from you, damn will. They're not from a world where there was a black side of train tracks and there was a white side. So this appeal they have for this world they want to see just doesn't exist. And they lead themselves down. They're leading themselves back into a segregated burning house this time.
So just with that, a couple of things. A lot of these kids are raised and taught in a bubble of like a post-racial society. If you have any children under the age of like from like 10 to 15, 16, you will have seen their curriculum and what like, especially if they live in like a liberal town, what kind of schooling that they go to. And I think a lot of them leave school and realize that we don't live in a post-racial society and don't really know how to deal with it. I think the death of expertise. Everybody thinks that they know what they're doing because they have TikTok and they saw a couple of videos or went to YouTube University. It's really funny, like a lot of these kids want to tell you what to do with the internet when some of these things are the things that they're using are things that you built. They have a get fast approach where they think that we just don't know how to do it fast enough, and they have some secret code that's going to get them richer and quicker. And lastly, they have no idea. These kids are on Amazon Prime. They're on Discord in these little bubbles. They have no idea what struggle looks like. Missing the bus and getting their jeans wet, not getting what they wanted. You see them crashing out in school because somebody took their phone away. What are they going to do in an anarchist situation? They have no idea. They have no idea.
Crystal, do y'all realize that if the government wants to, like if it's going to be a dictatorship, the government can just turn off the internet and that's it? Do they realize that?
And I think like the thing is like every generation did do a form of this, but the government wasn't using them as useful idiots to forward an agenda that could change this fabric of the country forever. That's just my opinion. Okay, but yeah, I agree with Ryan, y'all. We gotta have more patience with some of these younger people. Are these old motherfuckers that keep coming up here? Like the TCs and Anthony's, you ain't gonna be able to change that.
Can y'all hear me?
Go ahead, Chad.
Alright, I want y'all
You
to.
gotta change your name. That's gonna keep picking up. I'm gonna call you Jay.
That's cool. Alright, I want y'all to start over because, alright, so what I'm basically trying to articulate, it's kind of hard to articulate to people who already got a fixed mindset. So, alright, the disconnect between the younger people and the older people is the older people are not accepting new information. Because if you think about it, or the black family, it's a black
information
new information or new ways of thinking. Like, okay, you know how like Martin Luther King, I'm gonna just take it all the way back. You know how Martin Luther King was saying like, okay, he had a dream, white people, black people, like looking at it together. And then he turned around before he died and proved that he did us a disservice because he realized like, okay, these people were never gonna go this, they're never gonna let us get in the position, they never gonna do these things for it, they're never gonna get a certain generation. We're not gonna do anything that they promised us, and then they killed him. So fast forward time, shit, following government, getting all the vaccinations, and doing all these things that the government is telling us to do, and having faith in them. And as time going on, we looking at our parents, and we getting older, we not vaccinating our kids because we doing further research on the dangers of vaccines and how it plays a part in a lot of ADHD and bipolar and all type of behavior problems. So when we researching all this shit, we get more educated with science and all this new information, not new information, but updated information, real information. And we try to come back and tell our parents and stuff like, hey, this is what we found out. This is why I'm not getting my baby vaccinated. And they want to still argue with us and tell us, you don't know nothing. It's like, no, y'all was so a bunch of all the girls is stripping and being hoes and all the niggas want to kill each other. We just
And that has to do with vaccines.
No, not vaccine. That was just an example.
Okay, so what I'm telling you is bipolar has nothing to do with vaccines. So when you guys come to us, because I have children in your age, how are you?
27. This 27.
Oh no, you're older than my kids. Okay, no problem. So when they come to me with misinformation that they got off of TikTok, Facebook,
Gotta have more patience. Bitch, you in the matrix. Bitch, you in the matrix.
Is anybody else hearing her coming in and out?
Yeah, she's coming in and out. Am I coming in and out?
Yeah, now you're
okay. Let me be quick.
You're back in the matrix.
No.
You're in the matrix again, please.
Holy cow. Okay, I'm coming.
So I did want to address something when you talk about Martin Luther King. He still believes in integration. What changed was economic justice. That's what it was.
Martin Luther King.
Yeah, and militarism. It wasn't separation. He never turned to separation.
Yeah, there's a book you can get called Kingonomics by Dr. Rodney Sampson, and it takes a look at the economic philosophy of Dr. King in the last years of his life. I'd recommend it.
Yeah, he still wanted us to be able to integrate. It's more about economics. It was about systematic racism. And I think he was becoming more militaristic, right?
Yeah, what is racism?
No, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole because there's a big
Okay, I'm gonna just say this. Economics definitely has racism has a part to play in economics. Racism is systematic. And Thomas Cole has good information on economics too.
Yeah.
So basically, what I was basically trying to say is, say your whole family get kidnapped, right? And the kidnappers have y'all live by these set of rules, and everybody's just like your whole family is just living by these rules. You have kids, and then your kids raise their kids to obey by these rules. It's like this is the generation we realizing that we have been fucking kidnapped, and we need to stop playing the fucking game. This is fucking sick. That's what I'm saying. Now, so I'm saying I like Trump. What Trump is doing, because Trump is fucking tearing this shit apart. This is what needs to happen.
This is not what needs to happen. So, Jess, you brought up Martin Luther King, right? You ever heard of the Poor People's Campaign?
Yes.
So I want you to Google Poor People's Campaign and look at what's happening today, right? So, like, at that time when, with the Poor People Campaign, or even the book that he recommended you read, he started to realize, like, white folks want to support us when it comes to civil rights. But what if their support is going to be fragile when they feel like they're going to lose power to resources? that's what's happening now, right? So like I always bring up these little Psychology Today magazines and all this shit to support for Donald Trump's white young men. It's their access to resources, their access to power. They feel like they've lost that. They don't see us getting moves. They don't see us sitting in the back of the bus, but they ignore the other difficulties that's going on, right? So because they don't see the fucking, they don't see that. They don't see dogs biting our kids and shit. They don't see kids getting rocks thrown at them going into the schools. They think that we're on equal playing. And now they think we've taken their resources and they don't have power. And King predicted this in the end.
So, have you ever heard the saying, or not? It's not a saying, but you know, like when you clean up something, it like when you clean up a house, it looks fucked up before it actually gets clean.
What's going on? Are you trying to be a poet? Because you coming up with something.
No,
he's giving a perspective on your office. So I want to like this. I do hear this quite a bit.
Okay.
So like, just like somebody had said it earlier. In order to get Hitler out of position, World War I had to happen, right? And it's crazy because y'all saying like World War II. Okay, World War II. It's crazy because like y'all saying stuff like the younger people don't know what hard times is and this and that. Like I'm from that generation like right before. Like I'm still old enough to remember like missing the bus and all this shit. I'm way before iPhones and all this shit. I didn't grow up with an iPhone in my hand. I didn't grow up with computers. I didn't grow up with shit. We didn't have TV in my home. Anyways, what I'm saying is.
27. I had computers and I was 40, so.
We were
I had AOL.
I had the lady where the brother said. Anyway, so, what I'm saying is y'all don't understand struggling is yet. However, although that is true, a lot of people haven't experienced a lot of stuff that y'all have experienced. We are more war ready and ready to fight for what we really believe that y'all ever had. We are more like the energy that we got towards each other, how we killing each other. We really want to take this towards the real opponents, but we don't have everybody backing us up, especially our elders. Man, y'all don't really want to die about this and really make a way in a different light for the people that's coming after us. Y'all don't really want to die about this shit. Y'all playing.
Let me just say something to you real quick, just because I just want to hold on one second. So, bro. I would implore you to just look up history. You're talking about, being ready to die. Go look at the murder rate when we were kids and the crime that was going on when we were kids. This, what y'all got going on is light fucking work. Y'all really think y'all are soldiers. And I'm with all due respect, y'all are guys, bro. Y'all have luxuries that we do not have. Y'all think y'all are ready for war. Y'all don't even understand what war is. Y'all have not had a crack epidemic. Y'all have not had the things that we have. Y'all are not the byproducts of the crack epidemic. You're not. You're not. And that's what we are. Sir, let me finish. You were allowed to talk. I mean, this is telling in and of itself. We allowed you to talk. Now I'm just interjecting to give you some information, and you don't want to take it. But what I'm telling you is you're abreast of what's going on right now. And you're talking about y'all are soldiers and y'all are killers. Y'all aren't. Y'all do a whole bunch
This N-word is a killer.
Y'all do a whole bunch of internet banging and a whole bunch of, chatting. Y'all do a whole bunch of cyber thugging. And then y'all do this drill music. This does not make you soldiers, and more importantly, it doesn't make you politically aware. You're just making noise, and you're an example of it because the things you're saying, you have no real basis in reality. You're talking about, look how we killing each other. We really want to bring it to something that really makes sense, bro. And you really need to slow down and rethink what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think this
whole idea of dismissing generational experiences, how they see it, is dangerous. And look, they lived through COVID, they lived through Trump, and they honestly may have a better perspective than many of us do because the world now is closer to how they see it than it is a modern experience we had. What we know from 20 and 30 years isn't as relevant today because of Trump. Normally it would be, right? But the experience they have may give them a more realistic perspective in a lot of ways.
May I say something real quick? Because I don't know. So real quick, we have grandparents and parents who lived through Jim Crowism in their particular states where they were virtually police states, right? Like you had to be inside at a certain time because crackers would kill you. Like, so if anybody has a sense of what we're living through, it would be older folks who actually understood that, listen, if you spoke a certain way, if word got out that you were, talking about the white politician in town, people would show up to your crib and there'd be a different kind of story. So I hear where CEO's coming from, especially in terms of like technology and things of that sort.
And I was talking about Gen Xers, just to be clear, not baby.
I understand, but I'm also speaking about like folks just older versus younger, where as just like a general matter, like and even when it comes to Gen X, they understand what these stories are because their parents and their grandparents were telling them these stories, and they're the byproduct of their struggle. All right. Final point. I don't want to dismiss a few things. One, we have a concerted attack by this administration, state legislatures, state governors in red states to eliminate Black history in our schools. So any possibility of folks understanding what our history is constantly being attacked right now. What in South Carolina, when they got rid of, I'm looking at this matter right now, South Carolina, where they were doing the AP African American Studies program, there was a lawsuit filed. I'm going to say filed it, but basically it's public record. But there was a lawsuit filed, and the court dismissed it. But this is like important stuff here, where like kids can't get access to Black history. And then the final point, which is a question for the gentleman who will speak after that, 27 years old, so something was mentioned about like, okay, we're willing to die for what we believe in. Question and a point. I'm not really clear about what the younger generation believes in. When my former professor who died, so he actually was around when Malcolm and Martin were alive and actually worked with them directly. He would say that like, even though everybody wasn't an activist, everybody knew what time it was. Everybody knew what direction we were trying to go in. All right. I don't know what this younger generation believes in to even fight for. And then finally, we have to get out of this mindset so I'll be curious about what y'all believe in that you're willing to die for. And then secondly, the point here is we have to get out of this mindset that like your commitment to a particular political struggle is your willingness to die for it. If anything, you should be willing to live for something. Live for a better future. Live for a better tomorrow rather than die for it. So I'm just curious about what this younger generation actually believes in that they would be willing to either live or die for.
Well, I'll say this, and my whole thing.
I think Fuji wanted to speak. He has been waiting.
Okay, appreciate that.
I'd like to get in line too.
It's not that they don't have access to information. It's what they just choose to engage with. They know exactly what they're saying. It's wrong. They know exactly what they're saying. It's stupid. I'm pretty sure the judge has read both sides of the argument. And he makes it at age 27 means he had over 12 years of public school system education. They had history classes. So y'all we're arguing with people who just they're living in a world they made an alternate universe. They made an alternate version of history. We can't convince these people. And I mean, I will hope for this young man. I'm 33, so I might never order this one. But the idea of him kind of ascending or understanding like Black history is pretty much moot because
they choose not to willfully engage with it. They choose it. Well, it's better if you don't get ready to die for it. They look at it. They look for this one great man. They look for the next VP Newton. That's the only thing they want. Is like they want to do. We need another you. We need another Mark. We need another Malcolm. They don't actually realize like it takes infrastructure and people to actually help them along the way to get to that point of having a VP Newton or Martin. You know what I'm saying? It takes masses doing that. It's not people willing to die. Like nobody is willing to die for anything. No soldier goes to war wanting to get killed. People want to go to war to go win. Like they're not even talking about winning. It's just a famous idea. Like no, enough of us die, it'll galvanize the masses into believing that, and that shit just historically is not true. So when we engage these kids, these young folk talk about things, man, talk about what they're the byproducts of whatever. They don't even realize how catered, how careful their world is. Even kids who grew up in the hood, grew up in the aftermath of the war, crime of the war, they don't realize like for the most part, you grow up in a world that's they got rid of pretty much all the real dope dealers, all the real cartels. They pushed them into society, they killed them, they put them in jail. There's no more super duper kingpins walking around the hood no more. These just penny ante drug dealers. These are the remnants. Ain't no more OGs left. They all got life sentences. They all super max. So when we talk to these kids, they don't even know that the world they live in. They live in a post-apocalyptic scenario pretty much with drug dealers. They don't understand that we like that era is shifted for them. So when they discuss these things about crime and dependency on things, and we need to get off of this and get on that, they don't understand that they don't live in the world. They've never really seen that world. They don't remember when there was. They don't remember the ghetto gunfight of the '90s. They don't remember the ghetto gunfights of the '80s between the police and drug dealers. They don't know that. They live in a very plush world. So until they understand that, until they realize, wait a minute, maybe my world's a little bit nicer because nobody has a Uzi out walking around the street. I know it's nobody like the crack epidemic isn't that real for me. Like you don't see full-time high-rise school drug dealers no more. They don't have a right to talk about these issues no more.
Well, I'll say this, and and I think there's an over emphasis on like the '60s and like that era because the world that people are in and are growing up in now is just different from that world. Yes, there was a time, and I know because my dad grew up in that era. He grew up under segregation and stuff in Alabama back in the '60s and marching the civil rights. But the thing is, we don't live in that era anymore. Like these young kids now, their biggest concern is not a Klansman. Like their biggest concern is like MS-13, fucking with them while they trying to play basketball in the park going towards the evening. So they gotta leave the park at a certain time in the evening because then MS-13 gonna show up. What I mean? So that's the world that we live in now. And I think that here's the thing, like Malcolm and Martin and people like that, Stokely Carmichael, the Panthers, they were all, legends, and they fought for what they believed in their time, but they are no longer relevant in the time that we're in now. So we need to retire them. We should respect them, but we need to retire them and put them to rest and deal with this what we got going on now. And no, we're not all going to think the same way. We're not all going to vote the same way. Or, I think that we galvanized that time period because we look at it as like this monolithic time period. We were all somehow moving in the same direction and moving. But there was a lot of people who disagreed back then. There were a lot of people who criticized Martin Luther King, criticized, the moves that he made back then and stuff like that. So it wasn't really all like that.
You don't think Martin had anything to say about gang violence and politicized gangs?
Like MS-13 is not
organizing gang members like freaking the vice board, and they were marching with them and getting folks in line. Like you don't think King had anything to say about gang violence, for example?
Well, I am confused about this though. Gen Xers are the ones who raised the generation we're talking about, so they got their mindset from Gen Xers. So it didn't happen by osmosis.
That's not true.
Why isn't that? How is that not true, Justin?
Because there are way more influences than just their parents. Even us, we don't get our mindset straight from our parents. A lot of us think way different than our parents. And these kids have hella other influences: video games, social media, computers, massive propaganda. Like, so this is not.
So I can prove it. How about please let me say something. Just I can prove it. Gen Z is the most trusting generation of her parents in history. There's surveys on this. They have a higher trust rate of her parents than millennials, Gen Xers, or baby boomers did. So we're the most trusting of her parents in history.
I don't see how that correlates to them being like that.
Like just parents.
Can I say something?
Of course, Dr. you got it.
Yeah, just real quick. I think CEO is partially right, and this is one of the things I said. The Gen X is the sort of post-soul kind of generation, and Gen X parents raise their kids with an attitude. A lot of Gen X parents raise their kids with an attitude that they were going to provide for their kids what they didn't have. And that became an indulgence in excess. They didn't want their kids to want for anything. Because as Gen Xers, we grew up with parents who were children of the Depression, who were children of segregation, and they had a very, I would say kind of limited, they had very restrictive ideas, right? And so Gen Xers kind of grew up without a lot of attentiveness, I would say. And these parents are overly attentive, and they indulge their kids. So CEO is a little bit right on that. But the thing I wanted to say to the other person that was speaking is, even in your comment, your perception of the history is it's awkward because it's more than Martin Luther King. And what's different about the kids now is that as kids or as 20-somethings, they are not engaged in the real politic of their environments. When those people, like the civil rights movement, yeah, we think about Martin Luther King, but those things were done by college students. It was college students that were doing those sit-ins. It was college students that were marching with King. When we think about that, we think of all the older people, but there were young people that were doing those things. And even as a Gen Xer, we had a political consciousness. We may not, all of us didn't live in drug-infested environments, but we knew that this was the reality this was a social reality that we had to be aware of, and that we had to be consciously committed to not being involved in, or doing what we could as when we became adults to make sure that that didn't persist. So I think it's a different kind of social conditioning. And the lack of understanding and the lack of knowledge of history is the problem. These young people are living very curated lives. I put that in the chat. Curated by their parents, curated by the internet. And so their perspectives are very narrow. And it's all about
projection alert of the day. Projection alert of the day.
And that's not the way it has been in previous generations. And I think that is a particular problem, especially for us as Black people, because we are living in the civil rights movement right now, right this moment. We are living in it. And they have no awareness of that.
Those are great points, Dr. AG. Hard to build upon that. I wanted to just add, there's a structural component to this as well that I think cannot be ignored, that really comes from the time of Gen X, particularly deindustrialization, the attack on teachers and workers, deunionization. These are spaces where folks are becoming politicized, along with
what I believe is the increase in higher education as you begin to see more Black folks enter higher education. During the 1950s and 1960s, we know that going to colleges and universities didn't cost nearly as much, not even close to what it costs now. But you begin to see the increase of higher education over time as more Black people get enrolled, and when you begin to see Black studies, ethnic studies, and Chicano studies, among other things, come into academia. And I think that's deliberate to make college and going to college something that's so highly coveted and something that you should pursue to ensure that your family, specifically your family, is good. Dr. A.G. made a great point, which builds on CEO's point, that, it very much was like, hey, listen, we need to make sure that you had things that I didn't have. And I think to a certain degree that, and not the analysis, but that approach is a very kind of individualized approach when it comes to raising children, as opposed to kind of understanding a kind of collective obligation. Obviously, this isn't true for all Gen X folks, but I do believe that as you began to see the emergence of neoliberalism, what you also saw was an individualization of what it meant to be a Black person in this country. I mean, Manning Marable wrote how capitalism was underdeveloped in Black America, of course, drawing from Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And I think his analysis is right in that regard, at least culturally, that you begin to see a departure. Well, I think Jesse Jackson said we need to move from civil rights to civil rights. So I do think Gen X has a certain kind of role to play in where we are, but I think it has a lot to do very much with a departure from, or rather a transformation, let me put it that way, a transformation of what the movement was, which was to fight for rights, which then became to fight for, opportunities, in corporate America, opportunities with white-collar jobs, especially when you began to see blue-collar jobs when you began to see the start of CEOs making vast amounts of wealth compared to their working counterparts. So I do think that there's a structural analysis as well. The attack on teachers, we still continue to see that. The refusal to even have folks be exposed on the primary, intermediate, and secondary level to Black history, among other kinds of marginalized histories. So I don't lay the blame squarely on young people. There's certainly a role to play there, but like this shit is structural and it's deliberate. And the young people that we're seeing now, they're really becoming kind of like the collateral damage in some ways as a result of what we've seen so far.
And Black Freedom, this is a quick kind of question for you. So you mentioned earlier how hip-hop artists were different in the 90s, and of course I agree with you. However, if they had internet and social media then the same way we have it today, how much closer would they have been to what we see today?
I mean, it's tough. I think, for me, it's kind of like a ground up thing. I think the conversations would be different. So, for example, motherfuckers hated Reagan. But also there was this, I think, larger global push to end South African apartheid in the late 80s, early 90s, especially among the Black community. There was culturally an emphasis on like doing Black things, whether you're talking about movies, film, television, music, all that stuff. Like it was just, I repeat myself on that, but you get the point. Ultimately, like I think there was a kind of like, also obviously Afrocentrism, but I think culturally things were different. There was still kind of collective consciousness that we aren't seeing as much today, even when we saw that in the 80s and the 90s.
Those are some great points. If you don't mind me adding to it, can I ask Just, you're still there? I don't know if it's Justin or Just, but I have a question for you. Being 27 years old and doing what you're doing, trying to free think, trying to find the right things to think about. I find that from people I grew up with, because I grew up in Las Vegas, I grew up 28th Street gangs. When I was around gays, we lived in a brick apartment because there was a lot of drive-bys, and a lot of bullets can go through bricks. And then I moved to the country, and I live in the country now. And my question to you is, I've seen in my life where economic disparity, this has crippled all people. Colors, say.
Yeah, maybe while he deals with that, I'll just jump in. Oh, are you back? Okay. I'm thinking about the legacy of the No Child Left Behind policy that Bush implemented in 2002 and then was replaced by every school succeeds in Clinton. So that would have been the entire time that just was, people in his age group were in school. And while it focused on and so things like teaching to the test and how that kind of narrowed the curriculum, because I believe those tests were focused mainly on reading and math, among other things.
And if I could just put together defunding schools.
Right.
Defunding's what we need.
Exactly.
It's coming.
Yeah, so there was less teaching in topics like, social studies and history.
How is there less teaching if there's less money?
And then
Maybe it's not all about the teaching.
The long-term effect being that non-tested subjects were de-emphasized or cut entirely. And that's particularly in so-called underperforming schools, right? In low-income districts. So we know who that is. So yeah, I just wonder if all of this might have to do with, younger folks not having the same education that maybe some of us older folks had in terms of the history and stuff like that.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, that's great too. Let me get this question out, and I'm gonna get off here. Thank you guys for broadening my understanding of what goes on out there in the world.
Thanks for teaching me something today, even though you didn't teach me nothing.
How, or have you been taught, or maybe you're teaching yourself, or maybe you come alongside a mentor, but how are you, as a young man, because I'm 22 years your senior, as a young man,
Junior. You the junior, not the senior.
I'm curious how the young people look at this, because I work with some young people, this is their thoughts.
Oh, maybe he ain't the junior.
Me personally, or you want me to speak for
you people? I'm talking to you personally. How are you economically? What are you doing to better yourself economically in your life right now, your situation?
So right now, me personally, I'm just paying for something that I don't want to speak on right now. But so I'm starting a nonprofit organization. Starting there and starting with my book that I'm writing as well. And from there, I have negotiations with other people, and we're going to be planning on part of the nonprofit. We're going to be partnering with this program. I can't even think right now, but where they're going to be able to get people housing, affordable housing, and building it from the ground up, things like that. It's like the humanity of America or something like that. Anyway, so Habitat. We're doing stuff like that. Yeah, Habitat for Humanity, partner with them, and training with just building a house from the ground up for a lot of the boys and girls. And from there, taking a lot of the money and investing it back into the organization, and then taking whatever accumulates from there. We gave ourselves a 10-year span, accumulate income and money to set aside for further investments, and not even just for ourselves, as far as real estate and things like that. But put money aside to really bless people, so they can go back into their story and incorporate God and how God moved in my life and moved in their life. Because we want to get start people off with a fighting chance of owning property. If I could just put myself in position and leveraging the people that's around me, because I got some real good people around me, and we can get properties to just bless people with, paying for a kid goes a certain amount of days without getting it filled from school, like a day that's usually bad. Like I want to turn get like a certified bill, give them something I'm really looking forward to. So they can be like, okay, I can't own the house, and it's something that I could either build upon and sell it, or keep doing it and get into real estate, or it's something that I can have as equity, something I can pass down to my kids, things like that. So that's really, as far as I'm looking at it, following my purpose, and the income, residual, everything's gonna come from there as long as I follow my purpose and do what God put on my heart by telling my story. Because I am one of those YNs that y'all call, but I learned a lot, and I came from out of that. You know, I still got some of the ways, I got some of the attitude still on me. I still got a lot of work to do on myself. But yeah, that's how I'm looking at it.
No, that's awesome. I love hearing how young people, their minds work differently, and that's exactly. You're seeing so much more stuff on the internet as a different generation, so you're exposed to so much more than what I was exposed to. My thought process when I was your age, we'll still be young, we'll just mainly self-self. So it's awesome seeing you wanting to help and give back to the community. But you hit it on the head that there's no bigger testimony. I believe in Lord Jesus too, man. He's my Savior. I try to be guided by the Holy Spirit. There's no more God than Him. When I try to do it myself, it's a big mess. So I know He died for my sins the third day. That's what I believe. When I let Him lead, it's so much better than when I try to do it myself. There's no bigger testimony out there than you doing it. And also putting into yourself knowledge, money, understanding how things are going on economically. People can see you do it, and then your life, because that's what they're going to want to do. So I would definitely encourage you to look into, as far as life insurance, IUL, something to pay your back, you can take loans off. You can get those houses. You start putting money in. I think if I'm not mistaken, you got to put in 2 or 3 years, and they're able to take some equity out of that IUL, and you can start going and get you a house and then pay the IUL back. That's how you become your own bank. You get rid of that system. Then you start getting compound interest on your IUL. You can do so many things. You, as a younger person, have so many opportunities to make a change in your life and people around you that I didn't. And maybe there's some people that are older than me in here that probably didn't have the same thing either. I'm learning younger. As we're sitting here right now talking, you guys were talking, I'm trading stocks in the stock market. I'm showing you what keep all the way down. What's that? I'm sorry, I thought I was on mute. I'm not worried. Hold on.
Don't take those chances anymore.
Anyway, just encourage you, man, keep doing it. I want to thank you guys for this conversation that we have here. So I appreciate you.
I'm a firm believer in holding.
Oh, start filming.
I don't believe you can have those type of aspirations when you're literally supporting something that's
Getting away with that being injured in the
trying to get rid of you and make sure that shit you're talking about is impossible. Like I don't want to be a Debbie Downer dog. I'm just gonna keep it on with you, nigga. You make no sense. Like everything you right. Like no, I'm talking for just dog. You're asking to create this better world, but you're supporting policies and a person who actively is open telling you, I want this shit to burn down. Dog, make fucking sense, bro.
Can I just add a quick sentence to what Fuji is saying? Everything that you and Ryan have been talking about is based on a legal regulatory framework and this idea of rules that are applied fairly and can be counted upon to apply in the same way going forward into the future. So if we got rid of all of that, then all of these plans disappear. You realize that?
I'm about to chain the boat up.
So you're saying that the fair market that we have now, if we get rid of the fair market,
The Harvard is probably going to stop it. I need to go get my back.
I think the problem with like what he was saying is like if you ask for no rules, but you do want to make rules, you want to make the world fair for people. Then you don't believe, but you also believe the world should be cooler first before it gets fair for people. It doesn't really add up. Like you're telling people to survive. Nobody survives hard times. And that's just the reality of hard times. Nobody survives it. Anytime people don't survive genocide. Genocides for the most part throughout human history are quite successful. Anytime there's like a collapse of a government happens, people die in droves. There's no world where like this country ended, but the world got better. It takes hundreds of years for that to kind of recover.
I don't want to.
The Dark Ages happened. That's why the blank period
We'll probably take a note and put it in my
these things occur.
backpack, even though I don't want it.
Europe post-World War II, there's an entire missing generation of Europeans. 2 or 3 missing generation of Europeans, and the world has never really recovered from that as far as white people birth rates. That's where there's such a hyper decline right now. They're literally missing white people. So when we take into account like the
idea of let's make the world better, you have to realize that people who are making the world better are usually going to be on the left, not people on the right. People who are conservative are not interested in the shit Justice talking about in no capacity. They don't believe poor people deserve food, housing, or a chance to better opportunities. It's literally a college.
You're kind of categorizing everybody, putting everybody in a little box.
It's the truth, though. It's the truth. I'm not categorizing somebody. I'm not categorizing when somebody openly states and makes a 925-page fucking manifesto of how they're gonna make the world worse. That's not categorizing somebody. When over 70 million people vote for that shit, that is not me saying I'm categorizing people. When people actively go to rallies, support people saying we're gonna make it, we're gonna turn it up a notch. This guy here who just died, he's the reason we're gonna use this injury for him to die to make the world a much worse place for people who we don't agree with. I'm not categorizing people. I didn't even categorize you. I'm just saying if you believe in the ideology of that guy, you support this guy, you don't believe make the world a better place. Fuck out of here with that. Let's make this shit cut and dry. Draw a line in the sand. You cannot agree with this man's policy and think this man is a good president. Then sit back and say you want to make the world a better fucking place for everybody. When he actively says, I don't want to help nobody.
So you're sitting there saying is what Justice just said, what he said that he wants to do to help people is a complete lie. Because he likes what Trump is doing as far as tearing down the government. Start
Put into value.
Yes, you
It's
can be
about
arson.
some system put into value.
Can I just say
the
too, I think one of the biggest differences between
priorities.
folks traditionally on the right and folks traditionally on the left, or at least based on the policies that they've enacted and what they run on, is the left or the Democrats have historically championed regulation. Like, we need industries to be held to certain standards. We need them to follow certain rules. You know, for example, the Democrats with the consumer, I'm sorry, I don't know the exact name, but the Bureau of Consumer Protection, the Consumer Protection Bureau, I believe, with Elizabeth Warren. And, you know, in the wake of the housing crisis on 08, we need rules, we need to regulate. We can't let these people run amok. Capitalism's all well and good, but it has to be reined in by regulation. And then on the right, the argument is all this regulation, all this red tape, this is just hindering innovation. We need no rules. We need a free market. Adam Smith, invisible hand, let the market do what it do, and it's going to work out great for everybody. But what we've actually seen is people on the right who are backed by billionaires, they don't want regulation because then it's easier for them to make up anything and do anything and cheat or whatever and not have anyone looking over their shoulder telling them you have to be fair here, you can't do this there. So then there's no ceiling. Is somewhat of a ceiling. There are some rules, there are some guideposts, there are some fences, so that all everyday people can participate in that system, right? I can participate in the stock market or whatever. I can buy a house. And I know that there's going to be certain rules that protect me because I don't have the influence of a billionaire. I don't have the unlimited resources. So I need the federal government to step in and give me some protection from the wild, wild west, right, of the market.
Sure, I would say that, a lot of people had problems with it, but I don't have a problem with billionaires being billionaires because a lot of people think that they just stack their money up like Duck and Scrooge over there in the corner in a vault in their basement, and that's how it gains interest. That's not how it works. Innovation is huge. I think that they put the money back out there because they know if they put those billions of dollars back out there, it's going to return even more money to them than it would just sit in the bank account getting 4% interest. That's how millionaires and people in business think, and that's how their life thinks. So I think personally, as Just doing what he's doing is a very good thing. I think he wants to help his community, on top of not just help his community, but get alongside people that mentor him that have done the things that he's looking forward to doing. And that to me is a huge.
Yeah, but y'all don't have all of this ideology and roses and strawberries. That sounds great, but that's not the world we live in. That's not what's going on. So he can have all of that, or I don't even know how you got that. This just said he supports a man who is actively against people that look like him. So I don't understand, what positive, y'all gotta, always talked about being soldiers, but don't want to stand on nothing. I don't get it. I'm just lost.
This what I'm saying. First, I want to say this. Understand.
Can I ask him a question real quick, Justin? I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Let me ask him a question real quick. Coach, I don't know you, man. You sound like you're an educated cat. I ain't gonna lie about it. You sound like you know what's going on. Can I ask you a question? Do your boss come up?
Both.
Okay, cool. You got both, man. I ain't mad at you. Do your thing. Let's say the boss that you're working for, even though you are a boss, but the boss that you're working for, if he come to you and told you right to your face, point blank, I don't know what you get paid. I ain't trying to go there and all that. But I'm just saying, he come and told you right to your face, I don't like the way you look. I don't like the way you think. I don't look like you. I don't know if you're black or white, but let's say he's opposite. I don't like the way you look. But I can look at your work ethic and I cannot deny that you work hard. And I like that. So I'm going to give you a $10, $15, $30, $100,000 raise a year on top of extra vacation, extra benefits. Would you accept that from him, or would you quit that job just because he didn't like the way you looked?
So now we're taking handouts.
But that's not actually how.
I asked a simple question, man.
Can I just respond briefly and then I'll
I
have
don't really understand how that.
Because wait.
That doesn't really make sense.
So, culture, you said you would take it. You'd be like, yeah, okay, I don't care if you don't like me or nothing, the way I look, but I'll take that money because you respect my work ethic.
Yes, I would take it, and then I would go to HR.
Good. Fair enough. That's just a simple question I was asking.
But how does that correlate?
Because I know some
what we're
people,
talking.
because I've dealt with people that I work with, and I ask that same question. The guy I work with, he's, we keep each other honest. He's on the left, and I guess I'm in the center or right, whatever you want to call it. And I asked him that same question. He said I wouldn't take the money, and I would go to HR and try to get a lawsuit. And I was trying to understand in my mind that for me, I don't care what somebody thinks about the color of my skin, the thing I comb my hair, I got a bald head, it doesn't matter to me. If I work my butt off and they recognize that and they're willing to reward me for my hard work, then I'm more probable to accept that and likely to accept that just because they recognize the hard work. I don't need you to like me as a person. I don't need you to like me because of my skin color. But dang, I put my butt on the line. I come in and give up my hours to get compensated for hard work that I do. And if you recognize that, you're willing to compensate me for that, then I've succeeded in that part.
I'm glad you said that. Well, let me just say that, and that underlines exactly your values and what you feel is important. You cannot disrespect me for no amount of money. I'm a black man who understands history. I understand what people look like, with the people that in my own family lineage and in other family lineages and in other disenfranchised humans on this here landmass had to go through for me to even have the luxury of getting up and going to work today and being offered the option of a raise, for me to allow someone to disrespect me for some fucking money. And that is where, when I don't know how old you are, but this is what I'm talking about. The Republicans or whatever, I don't know what you are, but a lot of these people talk about morals, values, law and order. And to me, I don't care how much money you argue. You start off with saying, I don't like you, I don't like the way you look. We have a fucking problem in this country, because that doesn't, when you say you don't like me, you don't like the way I look, that doesn't mean that means as a black man, that means a whole bunch of other things behind that. And as a Hispanic man, as probably a Jewish man, when you hear those words, that's not just, I think you're ugly, which is fine, but it's not just, I don't like your personality, which is awesome. No, that's a dog whistle, or it's telling what I don't like you as your presence, as a race, as a person who has autonomy. I don't like that. So yeah, we got a problem, and then furthermore, I would still have to continue to work with you, so I would have to have some type of trust, and that just because you offered me some money, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna trust you and move forward with you. And I think that's the biggest disconnect that we have in a lot of these conversations, because y'all are saying that like that's valuable, and that's not valuable. to accept money over anything because that's just not valuable. You have to have some type of dignity. And honestly, if you have kids and you're a progenitor of, other little bodies, you will want to take a stance because that doesn't move the needle for them. You took the money, and now they're gonna go through the same shit you went through, and they may not get offered, money. They may get killed all because you were you were only thinking about money. So I think different.
No, that's respectful. I respect your opinion, your thoughts 100%. The way I see it is that if I was given that extra money, even though somebody didn't like me because of skin color, my ugly face, whatever, I know that what I can do with that money in my side of my life and with my family and with the people around me and people that are hurting, I can help them a lot more. And then to me, that's where my heart's at. Sure, take me, beat me, work me down, talk me down, but if you're going to pay me to where I can help the ones around me really need it, then that's what I'm willing to do. Well, I'm not interrupting nobody, man. I'm trying to talk. I'm just asking.
Yeah, okay, go for it.
Thank you. So
He calls him a man. That's Scotty. That's a man. A gay man, but that's Scotty talking. That ain't a woman. It's Scotty.
Taking their money and giving it out because some people are saying, and I'm not saying this is your culture, but some people are saying, take the money from the billionaires, give it to other people. Now they're
That ain't a woman. That's a man.
You know what I'm saying? I can take it from somebody else to help people. It's kind of like a weird dichotomy to me, but I get where you come from and I respect what you mean, what you're saying, culture.
Brian, there's economic science with billionaires. A large part of how businesses of scale and corporations operate really differently than household finance or small business. Is when you have billions and billions, there's barriers to entry, there's economies of scale, there's all these really important important economic phenomena that have been documented for more than 50 years. Of course, we don't steal from billionaires.
Just keep borrowing.
Billionaires.
Just keep spending.
A lot.
And just keep taxing.
Their wealth isn't in salary. Their wealth isn't in cash. They keep their wealth in strange ways. So Kamala's...
You saying it wrong, dog. It's parents' wealth.
Class economist. She was an economist at Stanford. She's had some of the best economic policies out of any politician in U.S. history. She was just talking about when you're a billionaire, you got to pay your fair share of taxes. Because I think it was Warren Buffett that said, when I pay less tax than my secretary, there's something seriously wrong with this policy. And it's important to look at economics as a science. Because when you're a billionaire, you have economies of scale, you have barriers to entry, you have access to global markets. And small businesses and individuals and highly salaried individuals just don't have that. So we have to make things here.
Ryan, can I respond? Okay, and then I'll go on mute. But the example you gave, where the boss comes to you and says, "Listen, I might hate everything about you, but I cannot deny how hard you're working, and so here's $100,000, right?" That's not really how the economy or how capitalism works. If people got money based on how hard they worked or how much value they added, we would not have all of the extreme... I mean, who was working harder than the slave? Who added more to the America could never have been the economic superpower that it was early in its life as a country without all of that free, very, very hard-working labor that they made money off. Let alone, I mean, today you can look
There's no such thing as free, stupid. You still gotta feed, you still gotta clothe, you still gotta house, you still gotta care. Everything has an expense. It's called asset management. It's called
this is another disagreement between
expenditure of asset share.
Who is actually the person that is adding value to these corporations? From the perspective of someone,
the consumer.
The people, it's the workers. The workers are the ones bringing the value in those factors. These people could never do what they do. You couldn't make all the hot chocolate packets or whatever they do
without the workers. But the right, they're saying, no. The workers are just, they're little widgets. They come and go. They're a dime a dozen. It's actually these visionaries and these, CEOs and these investors that are adding the value, right? The other thing is, if people were making money based on their hard work, why hasn't the federal minimum wage, isn't it still like $7? This is crazy. I mean, imagine, just think about that. I worked my ass off.
Think about that.
And I was given $7? This is crazy. And then what the Democrats are saying should be the federal minimum wage, or I think Bernie, for years, they've been saying $15, which is also very little. This doesn't even come up to the standard of living. They haven't even increased it. I mean, from my perspective, they should have said, sure, we wanted $15 12 years ago, but now we want $25 because everything is more expensive. So even the basic concept of you should be paid a living wage, the amount of money you make should be equivalent to what it takes to buy some food and pay your rent. That is controversial. So this is the whole idea of, because the unregulated capitalism, what you'll hear all the time in these corporations, you've got to do more with less. We've all just got to do more with less. Are the CEOs doing more with less? When have they ever? They are doing less with more. So the idea is that the system, if you let it play out on its own, and if you're a Christian, then you should believe in the fallen nature of man, that we are inherently, since the fall, we are greedy, we are wicked. We need the awesome power of the Holy Spirit to come into us and help us to do the right thing and to see the light. So therefore, if that's what we believe about people, we know that people are greedy. We know that people are going to play unfair. We know that people don't have the care, by and large, that they should for their fellow man. And the system that we have, if anything, has rewarded this and pushed it even further and further. So that's why we needed some basic laws and regulations, not even whatever the people on the left, the Democrats, whatever, are advocating. It's not going to result in people being rich, but maybe it could result in people being able to eke out a meager existence, some sort of dignified life. And I just don't see how anyone could be against that on the basis that, no, that's bullshit, because this billionaire needs to buy his 12th yacht. Like, it's ridiculous.
All right, I think Spirit.
Ridiculous!
So I want to kind of move the mic around a little bit so some new people can talk too.
I mean, the conversation has shifted, but it's remarkable listening to people with so little integrity that they're okay to be shit on to make a few dollars. Meanwhile, you are impacting everybody ahead of you to create and perpetuate a system where the next people are continued to be shit on over and over again because you lack integrity. It's remarkable to me how low we have sunk.
Projection alert number 2 of the day.
TC, do you have something that you'd like to? Well,
That's a first.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of confused. Just you're saying you agree with Malak, but she's not saying anything that aligns with what you're saying. So, is your mind being changed, or what's going on?
No, so okay. Just before I speak, just understand that everything I've said, you haven't understood anything I've said yet so far. So
Have I not understood, or have I just disagreed?
both, because you didn't ask any questions for clarification.
Classes, listen. So let me explain something to you. You asked
Take him to school, brother.
when you need
Teach him the
clarification.
truth.
If I didn't need clarification, there was no need for me to ask for clarifying because a person hears you and understands the first time doesn't mean that they weren't listening. Like, so go ahead. I understood what you said. I just disagreed.
So, I don't know if it was you or I didn't have my phone in my hand, but somebody had said something like, how can I be wanting America to fall, but at the same time I'm talking about building my community? And how does that correlate? How can I think both of those things at the same time, right? Was that you that asked that?
I'm sure. I mean, that sounds like something me or whoever else. But my question to you was what I just asked.
What did he ask?
A very different opinion than Malek gave a submission, and you said she's cooking, which I agree with, but it doesn't align with anything that you said before. So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
I'm not trying it. I'm very, very open-minded to different perspectives and different ideas and different ways of thinking. I don't think one. So, like a lot of things can exist and be true all the time. That's just how I think. I think in layers. Like everything is multi-layered. Nothing is just one-sided. So I think when we do like even when I initially agree with something or disagree with something, I don't just stick to okay, I disagree. And the reason I might disagree because I'm disagreeing with something that may be true, it may not be true, but the fact that it don't align with the way I think, I'm not just going to just disagree and leave it at that. If I disagree, I'm going to ask questions to like really try to understand what the hell this person is saying because I'm so in such disagreement. I'm like, okay, where did you get this from? Why are you thinking this? How do you think this helps? Like, I will ask further questions to gain clarification whether I agree or disagree.
Or I could have heard this before, and you think your opinion is on the block, but it's a generated opinion that I've heard a million times. So I was able to identify it, and I didn't need to ask any further questions because I already know. I mean, you just don't have enough information, and that's with all respect, you don't have enough information, and so I implore you to just look at, history, because one thing you can learn about history is that it usually repeats itself. So you can take the things from history and you can, usually apply them, and skill.
Well, maybe you should study more than just history, like philosophy. It's just an idea. Because history ain't philosophy. And philosophy ain't even history. It's called intelligence.
But what you have to do is go further back, look further back in history. So you made a lot of definitive statements about your generation compared to mine. And, upon listening, you don't really seem to be informed about my generation or what's going on in the crack epidemic or So I would just implore you to look at those things and then do your comparative analysis and see if you come up with the same answers that you have now.
Yeah, actually, it's weird. I've actually been into this type of stuff. I've been doing my research. I know about the Reagan administration. I know about a lot of stuff. I've been doing deep diving like 12. And when I was incarcerated, I was privileged to come across a lot of books that a lot of people in the free world still to this day aren't aware of. Such as books like Behold a Pale Horse. Have you read that book?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Or since you say, okay, history repeats itself, do you remember how Black people was freed from bondage and slavery? Do you remember what took place in order for that to happen?
Yeah. And I just want you to know, Pale Horse, that's not like exclusive.
It's not an end all be all, no.
But it's also a very it's not a book that I would reference. I'll just say that.
Let me ask you a question real quick. What if you don't mind sharing, what industry are you in? You're a business owner?
I have been. I failed a lot in life.
But that's okay. But what are you doing right now for yourself?
Right now, I'm a truck driver.
Is it your own rig or are you working for?
No, I'm working for a company.
Finish? What's going on?
Oh, I didn't know they were. Go ahead.
So good. But yeah, so the question is, okay, so tell us how we, as Black people, got free from bondage. What took place?
What do you mean, like how slavery ended?
Yeah, like what made the white man say, you know what, freedom?
I don't know. I mean, that's a long story. There was a war, and
Who was fighting?
What do you mean? Who was fighting? The North and the South?
Before that.
We'll do better. Why don't you just tell
The
me?
man is a professor of history.
So I thought you would have these type of.
Well, I don't know where you're going with this. So once maybe I find out the line of questioning, that I can probably answer better.
Okay, so when I look back in history, and I came across the Gullah Wars, the Gullah Geechee people, and they went from plantation to plantation, killing a lot of white people. I'm not advocating. We went plantation. Look up the Gullah Geechee Wars.
I don't have to. I am that, sir.
She is the motherfucking Gullah Geechee bitch. Don't need to explain myself.
White people, right?
I do not.
So you should. Go back and look into it some more. I know you said you are Gullah Geechee. The lady who raised me, she's from Bonneville, Georgia. She's Geechee.
Because the Gullah Geechee Wars were a 100-year conflict starting in the 18th century.
Yes, ma'am.
You just told me that they were having a back and forth. Now you would have a back and forth. You're gonna interrupt.
Be quiet.
Justice,
Be
conversation.
quiet.
You literally just chastised me for
Be
interrupting.
quiet.
Bishop, do it again.
Same thing.
Go ahead.
So basically, when I look at stuff like that, right, and all that bloodshed, just for us to be fucking not even still treated as humans, just for us to be free from slavery, all that blood had to be shed, and it caused a panic across the whole nation. They like, fuck, if they keep this up, they're gonna kill all of us. They couldn't stop us. They could not stop them. They couldn't. So they had to free us, because that's what we were fighting for, to be free. So what I'm saying is, fast forward time, when has anything like that ever happened again in America?
You mean just Black people? Like, what do you mean, like physically, or do you mean as in just resistance?
Both.
I mean,
they go hand in hand. I'm talking on that scale, to where there's so much chaos going on that laws had to be moved.
Have you ever heard of the Black Panthers?
You know what happened to them?
But wait, hold on. Hold on. Let me just give you a little piece of it. What you're doing? Hold on. You're moving the goalpost. You asked me, did I have an example of a group, forming some type of resistance and them making a law in, as a retort or whatever. Damn, what is the word I'm looking for? But yeah, they made laws because of it. And so I gave you the Black Panthers. So now what? Don't ask me, so what happened to the Black Panthers? Because that's not the point that you were making. So
referendum was the word you were looking for, Justin.
Okay.
But yeah, that's cool too.
All right, so let me just try to bring my point home. The reason I asked that question is because you chimed in and said something, and I was in the conversation about to go somewhere else. I know that's not where I was getting at. You chimed in. Okay, so what I'm saying is with the whole Trump thing, right? Fast forward time, he said history repeats itself. If we don't understand history, we're not gonna know what the fuck we had. We're not gonna know what to expect. We have been doing what the fuck the government wanted us to do. We've been playing into their game for this long, and look how far it's got us, and look at the shit that we still talking about still to this day. We still have an issue with our government. Why?
Well, let me, and I know some other people probably gonna want to chime in, but before everybody does, I just want to say this. You know, I think that you have respect for the past, so I would say this, and I think you're cool, so I'm not gonna I think that you just don't know a lot of stuff or you don't realize. What I think is rude and is very like presumptive to say, oh, how far has it gotten us? Because my reply to that is very far. Do you know how we came here? Do you know what we came from? And you are sitting here as a black man able to express your opinion, and as a black man I'm able to debate with you without being killed, murdered, or whatever. And that's not eliminated. I don't want to downplay what is currently going on, but I think it's disrespectful to our ancestors who did these things to say we still, to slight it like that, like to talk about it in that way. And I would, that's why I would like for you to just think about what you say before you say it, because they moved a lot of needles. I just need you to understand.
I do understand, and I'm very appreciative of the people who came before us and died. They died in order for us to do this, right? They died. The people risked their lives in order for us to do this. You remember, like Freedom School, it was even white people that died for this type of freedom and liberty. So what I'm saying is something has to happen in order for a change on that scale. Like you said, history repeats itself, right? And the things that our people fought for, are you aware that right now, as we speak, a lot of those things that they died for are being undone. So are you aware that our freedom of speech is in jeopardy right now? You do know that, right?
So, Judge, I think this is the issue and the difficulty, right? It's like, yeah, you have these historical moments, and your connection between them needs to be clearer. You're jumping significant historical time. You started with the Civil Rights Movement, then you went to slavery, then you went to the Gullah Wars, which were the 18th century and ended like before the Civil War. Like the historical timeline needs to be a little more cogent. I get your point though, and I think what culturally was trying to emphasize is that, yes, history repeats itself, but that doesn't mean that it's always the same, right? You may have the same event. For example, if we are struggling now with this issue of free speech suppression, there have been other monumental times in American history, like the Red Scare, the McCarthy era, where people were penalized for their speech. People lost their jobs. Companies went bankrupt, right? Because the government was on a quest to root out communism. And so everything someone said or did, or meeting they went to, a friend they had who may have slightly smelled like a communist, people were punished for that, right? So now the issue isn't communism, it's something else. Now the economic conditions are different, but people are still losing their jobs. So it is the sentiment or the policy return or the practice return. It's not always a literal one-to-one. So yes, we have progressed significantly over time, but because we are living in a democracy, we will return and revisit certain circumstances or situations as the population grows, as economic conditions change, as culture change. We have to revisit these things for the new people. But the fight or the commitment to the idea, to the ideal, or to the principle can't change. If you are for like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you have to be for that all the time. How you fight for it, it's gonna look different, but that's but that's still the same principle.
Yes.
So hopefully that makes sense.
Just, I think the reason why I wanted to understand who you were first before I gave an opinion about how you were exploring your ideas is because I wanted to understand the type of person you were and what your worldview is. I think anybody that would lecture you that you're not doing it right, that you're seeking for information, it's not the right way to do it, that there are gaps in your logic and reasoning, is somebody that would indoctrinate you into their belief system. I think you're approaching. I think you're approaching these questions.
You're annoying. No one is indoctrinating anyone. That is a process of scientific reasoning that is not telling people what to think. You're an imbecile. You're an imbecile. You're an
asking just questions, and it was a very respectful back and forth, and it's the way you should engage in the exploration of your ideas and understanding the frontier of what you're studying.
It's not a frontier. It's a landscape, sir.
And you have to be prepared to defend your position, but at the same time have an open mind to these opinions. I think you've done that exceptionally well with Just. I would just like to ask you a question. I noticed that you kind of hinged a lot of your Ichigo wars and that type of thing. I'm curious, where do you think you find yourself at what time in the liberation struggle for Black Americans? Where do you think you find yourself? Do you think you find yourself on the frontier of that fight? That this is a new front to Black liberation, or do you find yourself, at the end of the fight, having won it and starting to step over into the promised land?
That question for me?
That's for you.
I see where I'm at right now. I see myself. I think it's stagnant. I think we are still, despite the changes that have been made. I think a lot of the changes that have been made were to pacify us. I think we have been very pacified and we've got very comfortable. But I think it's a lot of the same issues that we've been had. We're still having. Like,
and what do you think the reason is for that?
Because we are living on land that's being controlled by people who don't want to see us progress. They don't care for that. That's not their interest.
And how do you see yourself regaining your sovereignty and your self-determination from the stolen land that the people that occupy this land is on with you?
Me personally?
Yes.
Me personally, in my own personal life, I'm just going to, like I was saying earlier, with like focusing on the younger people under me. And so I want to focus on building my community up, and like that's all I can do is what I can do. Now, as for like a whole, as everybody who lives here, white, black, yellow, green, all of us as a whole need to stand up and actually do something. We're not doing anything. We like voting and all that shit. It's not doing it. It's not. Because if it was doing it, it would have been done.
I would challenge you, and then I'll give it back to the stage. I would challenge you to consider the voting habits of your people and whether that served your people well or not, right? Because I would argue that we have to critically analyze what are the beneficial outcomes of the decisions that we've been making over the last 30, 40, 50 years. I'm inclined to agree with you that we are at a bit of the word turning point has been used a lot over the last 2 weeks, but it's just an apt word or phrase to use right now. I do believe we're at a turning point culturally within Black America. We're realizing that our schools are no good. We're realizing that our people are too far dependent on the government for their sustenance, their well-being, their food and shelter. They're realizing that the political interests of the elite are not serving them well. They're realizing that their political alignment has been sabotaged by an agenda that takes advantage of them. I do believe we're at a turning point. What I would encourage you to do is I would encourage you to continue to explore those ideas, but look at it from the lens. This is not me telling you how to do it. I would just encourage you to do it. Look at it from the lens of self-determination. What is your value system, right? What is your community value system? Does your community value self-determination? No. Does your community value, well then you should change that, right? You should be able to. Exactly. So I think you should definitely explore what that looks like. Self-determination for us for far too long has not been a value system that we've held, at least not for the last 40 or 50 years. But now we're having a renaissance. This time period, this cultural time period that we're living in, is revealing the true intentions of the entrepreneurs that's been exploiting our community. On the left and the right. I like to war against the left all the time, but I can be open-minded enough to know that both the left and the right has taken at Black Americans for far too long. You can look at corporations, advantage, the redlining and shit like that. These are things that have been promoted on the right, but at the same time, it's also been promoted on the left with the crime bill and with the military, the prison industrial complex. Same side, right? The left. So what I want to do, but
you got 30 seconds, my dude.
I'm 6 minutes into a meeting that my team is on. So
all right, well, you about to be 30 seconds.
I don't need a lot of applause.
Now you got 20 more.
Because I encourage people to think against the groupthink. Groupthink wants herd mentality. That's where survival is. That's where instincts are. But far too often, when you follow the herd, you can follow the herd off the cliff. So I want to challenge provocative thought. I think that's exactly the path that you're down. I would encourage you to continue to use the Socratic method to explore your ideas and your worldview.
The Socratic method. How'd you just read Socrates, motherfucker? You can just read Socrates. You ain't even got to use the Socratic method. You can just read motherfucking Socrates.
So now, I'll let you hear that, and we tried to go as uninterrupted because I do want you to be able to hear both sides. So as you go through life, there will be silly Negroes that come and do this very thing that TC just did. They will try to feed you a bootstraps mentality and a self-determination mentality. This is not true. Do not fall for that.
Self-determination is not true.
TC, please let me finish. I'll let you finish. So, this comes from a place of hating yourself and wanting to get your good nigger sticker from a white man and wanting to point things out about your own community, and which is great. I do believe in being critical of oneself, but don't ever be the black man that allows other people or another group of people to make you think that somehow your group is lazy or